he had been contacted by Steve Cheek, who was trying to figure out a way to finance this thing through private measures. On November 12th, we wrote a letter to the county expressing our interest to be involved in the project, to finance the project based on the county's creditworthiness. On December 4th, we met with the county treasurer in Salt Lake to get copies of the audited county financials to assess for ourselves the financeability of the county and its ability to go get this project financed on the market. On December 21st, we interviewed 4 architects. On December 30th, we introduced GSBS to the commissioners, 2 of the commissioners, one of which was in California. On January 7th, we took a potential lender to meet the commissioners here in Kemmerer. On January 14th, we had all 3 commissioners down in Salt Lake to have a specific bond discussion, where we had our bond counsel and legal advisors to talk about the pros and cons of the different financing options available to the county. Prior to that meeting, the commissioners and the sheriff were taken on a tour to various jail and justice facilities. And then on January 20th, January 19th, the county adopted 2 resolutions which authorized the commissioners to take specific actions. We can answer those if those are things that you want to hear about more. On January 22nd, our firm submitted our formal proposal to be the developer for this project. On February 16th, the county and our firm entered into a pre-construction services agreement, which was authorized by the resolution. On February 22nd, we sought some county feedback on land, on site selection. On March 16th, we met with the commissioners to discuss the sites and decided together we needed to get more information and place the project on hold until we could gather more information on sites. And that brings us to today. I have more to share, but in the interest of time and community's interest in asking questions, maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Questions?
Why rent, not own?
What was the question? We couldn't hear.
Why are they going to rent the jail space rather than build it and own it outright?
And I can't, let me address part of your question, then the commissioners will probably have to address the substance of it. But perhaps it would be beneficial to just outline the basic idea behind the lease revenue financing, as it's usually termed. Essentially, what would happen is at some point in the future, the building would be constructed by a third party that would take ownership of that building, and there would be a lease that is entered into between the county and that third party, with an option to purchase the building. And so the benefit, or the idea is that you can own it. The county would have an option to purchase the building at any time. But they also have the option of just leasing the building, and if at some point in the future they decided that they didn't want to use that building anymore, they could walk away from it. And so it's not necessarily an either-or proposition of either we rent it or we own it. The idea is that we enter into a lease with an option to purchase the building.
So what happens when the contractor goes bankrupt, like the one on the BLM, and who pays the ticket there? Are we going to be stuck with a piece of crap-looking building like we're stuck with now in Kemmerer, the Frontier? I mean, I know they have to put up a bond. Does Wyoming have a required contractor's bond license? If we don't have that in place, we need it.
It would have to be bonded, yeah.
But we need to be sure it's sufficient. And they need contractors' licenses, in my opinion, so we know they're reputable.
And all those issues would obviously be addressed. And it would be my job to ensure that there's proper requirements in place for bonding and those types of things. But the main point, the other thing to remember is that if it's a piece of crap building, we don't have to lease it. Or we can back out of the lease and not have spent all the money to purchase the building. So there's no incentive for the developer to come in and build a junky building, because the county would just turn around and say, we're not interested in leasing it.
But the BLM said no, and there's that building.
I-
It's in bankruptcy. Who's gonna deal with the mess?
I'm not familiar with the intricacies of how that project was financed, if it was financed this way, or what the terms of their lease were, the terms of their contracts. I don't know anything about that project, so I can't speak to it specifically. All I can tell you is in this project, the idea is that you lease it with an option to purchase, and one of the requirements is that the lease has to have what's called a non-appropriation clause, which essentially means that the government, the county, if they don't have the funds available to lease it or whatever, then they can walk away from it.
I'd like to go back to this gentleman's question. Why lease and not buy? Thank you for explaining the lease to own option. But if you can just turn around and walk away from a lease, then what's the point of even building it in?
That's a good question. My name is Blaine Carlton. I'm bond counsel. I would be bond counsel for the county, which means my client would be the county and would make certain that the transaction is structured appropriately. A lease purchase type financing is a type of financing that can be used by governmental entities in the state of Wyoming to finance infrastructure. The reason why it's done is because they're...
Can I stop you right there?
Sure.
We don't have any authority from the Wyoming Supreme Court that this can absolutely be done in Wyoming. Where are you getting that from?
A number of counties have done this type of financing.
But they've not gone to court, have they? So where are you getting this from? Do we have anything from the Wyoming Supreme Court or the Wyoming legislature that says we can do this?
There's an opinion from the Attorney General from the state of Wyoming.
But that's not my opinion, correct?
Correct. That's correct. With respect to lease purchase financings, and the opinion from the Attorney General of the state of Wyoming then talks about the structure of a financing in order to pass muster under Wyoming law. And it's on that basis that I think a lot of these financings have been done. There are a number of counties in the state of Wyoming that have done financings of this type over the last 6 or 8 years. I've got 2 or 3 of them right here with me of transactions that have been done. But this is a fairly common type of financing done in the state of Wyoming. It's also done in other jurisdictions. Our responsibility as bond counsel would be to make certain that the transaction is structured such that it would comply with the opinion of the Attorney General from the state of Wyoming.
Can I ask a real quick question?
Sure.
Were you hired by Fundamentics or the people of Lincoln County?
We were made aware of the transaction by the Fundamentics people, and as was mentioned before, we met. When was it, in December?